When memory becomes a database, the photograph sat on his desk, a faded image of someone he used to know. He couldn't remember when he last looked at it without searching for the digital copy first. Memory had become something he outsourced. Birthdays lived in calendar alerts. Conversations existed as screenshots. The past wasn't recalled anymore, it was retrieved, and somewhere in that shift, he realized he'd stopped remembering how things felt, only that they happened. She scrolled through 5 years of photos in under a minute, thousands of moments reduced to thumbnails. Each one documented, tagged, geolocated, and somehow emptier than silence. When did memory stop being an experience and start being evidence? He couldn't recall the last time he let a memory simply exist imperfect, unverified, softened by time. Everything now demanded proof, as if living required a backup file. But what he discovered next didn't make him more organized. It made him question what he'd been organizing at all. Neuroscientists at Stanford noticed something unnerving. People with constant digital access to their past showed weaker emotional consolidation during memory formation. The brain, sensing permanent external storage, stopped investing in internal depth. Memory wasn't just fading, it was delegating. The research described it clinically, but he felt it personally. That strange flatness when recalling events that should have mattered, as if his mind had filed them under outsourced and moved on. She tried an experiment. 1 week without photographing anything she wanted to remember. No notes app, no voice memos. Just attention and aftermath. The first 2 days felt like free-falling. Her mind kept reaching for the record button, the reflex to capture rather than absorb. Part of her wondered if letting go meant losing it all. But on the 3rd day, something shifted. A conversation lingered longer. A meal tasted sharper. The sunset didn't need framing, it needed presence. And when she tried to recall it later, the memory arrived differently. Not as data, as texture. He closed the photo app, not to forget, but to remember differently. Cognitive scientists call it encoding depth, the richness with which an experience gets written into neural architecture. Passive documentation creates shallow encoding. Active attention creates layers. Sensory, emotional, contextual, narrative, the difference between knowing something happened and remembering what it meant. She realized her photo library had become a graveyard of moments she'd never actually experienced. She was there, camera ready, angles optimized, but never fully present. Thousands of memories stored, none of them inhabited. When was the last time you let a moment exist without needing proof it happened? He thought about his grandfather's stories, how they changed slightly each telling, details shifting like sediment. He used to think that meant they were unreliable. Now he understood those shifts were the memory staying alive, being re-experienced, not just replayed. Digital memory doesn't drift. It doesn't soften or reinterpret. It fossilizes, and in that permanence, something human gets lost. Maybe memory was never meant to be perfect. Maybe the imperfection was the point. She started noticing how her friends documented dinners more than they tasted them. How concerts were experienced through screens held at arm's length. How the first instinct at every meaningful moment was to make it shareable, as if experience needed an audience to be real. The paradox was almost poetic. In trying to preserve everything, we were forgetting how to live anything. He tried another practice. Once a day, he'd recall something without checking if he was right. A friend's birthday, the name of that restaurant, what was said during last week's conversation. His mind resisted at first, suspicious of itself, trained to defer to search bars and chat histories. But slowly, recall became an act of trust again. Not perfect retrieval, but creative reconstruction. His memory wasn't a hard drive, it was a living thing, adapting and interpreting. In stillness, the noise inside him became readable. Researchers at University College London found that people who regularly practiced unaided recall showed increased hippocampal activity and stronger autobiographical memory networks. The brain, challenged to remember, built roads instead of outsourcing to clouds. The use it or lose it principle wasn't just metaphor, it was neurobiology. She deleted her daily photo habit for a month. Not forever, just long enough to feel the difference. What surprised her wasn't how little she missed the documentation. It was how much richer her actual memory became. Moments started landing differently. Without the pressure to capture them, she could finally inhabit them. He stumbled on a term he'd never heard. Digital amnesia, the tendency to forget information we believe is stored externally. Phone numbers, directions, even our own thoughts documented in note apps we never reopen. The brain's logic was efficient. Why remember what Google remembers for you? But efficiency had become another form of loss. Part of him wondered if this was just nostalgia romanticizing predigital memory, as if forgetting wasn't always part of being human. Maybe, but there was a difference between natural forgetting and outsourced non-experiencing. She thought wisdom was a download until silence became her teacher. Her grandmother had terrible factual recall. Dates blurred, names mixed. But when she told a story, you felt it, the emotional architecture intact, the meaning preserved even when details drifted. That kind of memory wasn't about data accuracy. It was about relational depth. He realized he'd been treating his mind like faulty hardware, something that needed constant backup and verification. But memory wasn't a flaw in need of correction. It was interpretation, narrative, identity in motion. The cursor blinked on his journal screen. Not to record facts, but to process experience. To let memory become something more than storage. To let it become understanding. When did we start trusting databases more than we trust our own minds? Philosophers had warned about this long before smartphones. Socrates famously critiqued writing itself, worried that external text would weaken internal memory and understanding. He wasn't entirely wrong. But he couldn't have imagined this, a world where every moment could be stored, tagged, and searchable, and where that infinite archive might make us remember less, not more. She tried explaining it to a friend. I feel like I'm living in preview mode, everything a potential post, nothing fully experienced. The friend nodded. It's like we're archiving lives we're not actually living. Somewhere between algorithms and quiet mornings, he stopped optimizing and started understanding. He began treating memory less like obligation and more like conversation. Something alive, imperfect, relational. He'd recall an event, sit with uncertainty, let details surface or stay submerged. And in that spaciousness, memory felt human again. What surprised me most wasn't how a simple analog journal improved my workflow, but how it redefined what remembering meant to me. I wasn't expecting a tool to change my rhythm of thought, and honestly, I tested it more than once before I understood what actually mattered. This isn't a recommendation, just a reflection that stayed with me. I'll leave the link below if you feel called to explore what I mean. She started asking herself a different question. Not, did I document this, but did I experience this? The shift was subtle but He stopped photographing sunsets and started watching them disappear. Stopped recording conversations and started listening for the parts that couldn't be quoted. Stopped collecting memories and started living them. And paradoxically, what he remembered deepened. Neuroscientists describe it as reconsolidation. Each time we recall a memory, we actually rebuild it, integrating new context and emotion. Memory isn't playback, it's perpetual reinterpretation. That's not a bug, that's the feature that keeps us human. She realized the database model of memory was appealing precisely because it was inhuman, objective, unchanging, verifiable, but human memory was supposed to change. It was supposed to be colored by who we are now, not just who we were then. That's how we grow. That's how meaning evolves. He tried to disconnect and ended up connecting deeper, not to devices, to himself. To the moments he was actually living, instead of archiving for hypothetical, later review. Sometimes clarity isn't found, it's allowed. The photograph still sat on his desk, but now when he looked at it, he didn't reach for the digital version. He let the memory arrive on its own terms, incomplete, impressionistic, alive, and in that small act of trust, something shifted. He wasn't managing his past anymore. He was living with it. She walked through the city without her phone camera ready. At first, the impulse remained to capture, to document, to prove she was there. But gradually, a different presence emerged. Not the surveillance of self-documentation, but the intimacy of being fully here. When was the last time you truly listened to your own thoughts without needing to record them? He realized memory wasn't failing him. He'd been failing memory, treating it like a liability instead of a living, interpretive, meaning-making process. The database promised permanence. But memory offered something richer. The ability to change, to reinterpret, to let the past evolve alongside the present. That wasn't weakness. That was wisdom. She stopped measuring life by what she could prove and started measuring it by what she could feel. And somewhere in that transition, her memory stopped being a collection and became a companion. The cursor still blinked, but now it wasn't asking for documentation. It was waiting for presence. He typed slowly, not to record facts but to think through feeling. The journal wasn't a backup drive. It was a dialogue with himself, imperfect, evolving, alive. Memory, he realized, was never meant to be perfect retrieval. It was meant to be meaningful reconstruction. She closed her laptop. Not because she'd finished documenting, because she was ready to simply exist, undocumented, unverified, and somehow more real than any archive could capture. The evening light shifted through the window. No photograph, no stomp, just the feeling of being here. Now, letting the moment write itself into her without needing proof it happened. And in that quiet allowance, memory became what it was always meant to be. Not evidence of life, but the texture of living. What part of this reflection spoke to you most, and from where are you watching? Let's keep the dialogue open, quietly. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video.